Show tonight. We have Newt Gingrich, Joe DeGeneva, Professor Alan Dershowitz, Greg Jarrett, and so much more. But first, Judge Brett Kavanaugh is now about to face the fight of his and his family's life. Why? Last night, the President of the United States nominated him to the highest court of the land. And despite his impressive credentials, sound originalist philosophy, and by the way, experience at one of the toughest federal courts in America, predictably, Democrats, their friends on the left, the mainstream media, they have already ramped up all of their attacks. We're going to show you the worst of the worst and explain why this is so predictable. The smear campaign, by the way, would have been waged against anybody regardless of who the president nominated. And in moments, we'll do something the mainstream media will never do. We'll actually review Judge Kavanaugh's impressive background. And we'll remind Democrats about something they seem to be forgetting. Yeah, elections, 2016, they have consequences. And tonight, the president kicks off his all-important trip to Europe. Tensions are high. Protests are erupting all over the continent, which is a sign that America, yes, when it projects strength, Europe apparently hates us. But when America's weak, they love policies of appeasement, and they revered Obama. We have some major breaking news also tonight around the deep state. We will break all of this down in tonight's very, very important breaking news opening monologue. All right, so last night the president made what will be one of the most important decisions of his presidency. He nominated Judge Brett Kavanaugh to the United States Supreme Court. Take a look.
What matters is not a judge's political views, but whether they can set aside those views to do what the law and the Constitution require. I am pleased to say that I have found, without doubt, such a person. Throughout legal circles, he is considered a judge's judge, a true thought leader among his peers. He is a brilliant jurist with a clear and effective writing style, universally regarded as one of the finest and sharpest legal minds of our time. There is no one in America more qualified for this position, and no one more deserving.
Now, the president has now placed his full faith behind Judge Kavanaugh to carry out his all-important promise to send a constitutionalist, an originalist judge to the highest court in the land. And during the announcement, well, Judge Kavanaugh gave us a glimpse into what is his judicial philosophy. Let's take a look at that.
My judicial philosophy is straightforward. A judge must be independent and must interpret the law, not make the law. A judge must interpret statutes as written. And a judge must interpret the Constitution as written, informed by history and tradition and precedent.
What you just heard is a very different philosophy than the judicial activism that Hillary Clinton and the Democrats love and cherish. Now, Judge Kavanaugh's record is long, his background impeccable, his academic record is off the charts, his philosophy seems extraordinarily intelligent, very sound. Educated at Yale, he clerked for the outgoing Justice Anthony Kennedy. He worked in the Office of Solicitor General. He served as an associate counsel in the Office of the Independent Counsel Ken Starr. He was also a senior associate counsel to President George W. Bush. He argued cases before the Supreme Court. He taught courses at Harvard and Yale and Georgetown and Notre Dame. And his opinions have been extensively published in academic journals. And he has served in the powerful U.S. Court of Appeals for the D.C. Circuit for more than a decade, where his opinions were often endorsed by the United States Supreme Court. In 2016, during a speech at George Mason University, Kavanaugh spoke extensively about the importance of constitutionalism, and he heaped praise upon the late Justice Antonin Scalia. He said, "What did Justice Scalia stand for as a judge? It's not complicated, but it is profound and worth repeating often, that the judge's job is to interpret the law, not to make the law or make policy." Now, remember, the structure of the Constitution, separation of powers, federalism, are not mere matters of etiquette or architecture, but are at least as essential to protecting individual liberty as the individual rights guaranteed in that text. Now, this is the exact language you'd want to hear if you want an originalist on the court, and frankly, from any judge in America. That is what every judge should practice. The job of the judiciary is to interpret the constitutional law, separation of powers, due process, limits on government, And, of course, inalienable human rights. The judiciary should respect co-equal branches of government. That is the job of a judge in America. That is what it means to be an originalist, a textualist, a constitutionalist. By the way, that is what Antonin Scalia, Clarence Thomas, Samuel Alito clearly understand who they are and what it is they revere, our Constitution. But to the Democratic Party, their friends in the left-wing media, none of this matters. Judge Kavanaugh's impressive track record and resume doesn't seem to matter at all. Kavanaugh's fair and just philosophy, that doesn't matter. Because the left in this country, they want what's called the judicial activist. In other words, someone who will throw the Constitution to the wind and write laws and legislate from the bench. Someone who will even use international law, not our Constitution, as a basis for their findings. But most of all, Democrats want anybody not tapped by President Trump, who you, the American people, elected. In fact, they were actually attacking President Trump's pick before they even knew who it was, and they would have attacked anybody that he chose. Now, take a look at how members of the left were already sharpening their spears before the president's announcement last night. Take a look.
You just have to remember how extensive the conservative agenda is here for the Supreme Court. It's not just rolling back abortion rights. It's not just rolling back gay rights. It's not just eliminating affirmative action. It's not just expanding the death penalty.
I've never recall a previous president outsourcing at least the initial selection process to an outside interest group the way that this president has to the Federalist Society.
A woman's freedom to make sensitive health care decisions hang in the balance with this nominee. It is near impossible to imagine that President Trump would select a nominee who isn't hostile to our health care law and health care for millions and millions and millions of Americans, who isn't hostile to a woman's freedom to make her own health care decisions.
For the president, it's going to be all about the personal connection, who he feels comfortable with in the moment.
So you're saying he's going to pick the man, the white man.
So as REM once put it, the end of the world as we know it.
I've never seen a president of the United States, in effect, make himself a puppet of outside groups and choose from a group of right-wing fringe ideologues.
I frankly don't even think we should be considering this nominee.
And that's not all. Look at this official statement released by the anti-Trump Women's March organization after Judge Kavanaugh's nomination. Quote, in response to Donald Trump's nomination of, well, blank, to the Supreme Court, Trump's announcement today is a death sentence for thousands of women in the United States. Oh, whoever X was. Now, meanwhile, according to reports, those protesting the president's nomination on the streets of D.C., they were scrambling literally to fill in the blank posters with the nominee's name. This is an orchestrated smear campaign, so predictable, so coordinated, so filled with hate, demagoguery. It's kind of almost funny, except for the fact that their actions have real consequences. Many protesters became so aggressive last night at the Supreme Court of the United States that even our own Shannon Bream was actually forced to move her show inside because she felt threatened in that environment. And now the left is launching an all-out campaign to scream and to yell and besmirch and lie and smear and slander and use character assassination against Judge Kavanaugh. And by the way, his kids will be watching. Now watch this and remember, it's only day one.
He feels that the president doesn't have to follow the law.
If you are a young woman in America, or you care about a young woman in America, pay attention to this, because it will forever change your life.
Here is a memo to the Parkland students. If you care about common sense gun violence protection, Judge Kavanaugh is your worst nightmare.
If they get control of the one non-elected branch, the judiciary, they can turn the clock back in America. Decades, maybe centuries. That's been their goal.
He's a political animal. He has been for a big part of the formative years of his career. And so he thinks of this, I think, as, wow, we need to make sure that the United States of America stays safe by protecting the president from what? From investigation, from indictment, from prosecution.
Everyone said when Bork was nominated, well, the Southern Democrats will have to go along. Everyone will have to listen to Ronald Reagan, follow Ronald Reagan. And in the end, the politics completely reversed, and the good political vote was to vote against Bork because the case had been made against him, the country rose up, and he was beaten by a majority Democrats and Republicans voting against him. I think the same thing could happen here.
And some of this rhetoric, it was even worse on Twitter, social media. Look at this. Former Virginia Governor, Clinton hack, Terry McAuliffe. Look what he tweeted. The nomination of Judge Brett Kavanaugh will threaten the lives of millions of Americans for decades to come and will morph our Supreme Court into a political arm of the right-wing Republican Party. He sounds like Ted Kennedy, and he sounds like those that attacked Justice Thomas. Very predictable. I told you this was coming. Many top Democratic senators are now urging their colleagues in red state Democratic senators to throw justice and logic to the wind. They want them to risk their political futures just by voting against Kavanaugh. Now, it's important to remember, elections do have consequences, and I've said this many, many times. The 2018 midterms this November will be the most important midterms in the history. Now look at these 6 senators from red states that are up for re-election. They're in a bit of a bind right now. What are they going to do? Senator Manchin, West Virginia, Heitkamp, North Dakota, Nelson, Florida, Donnelly, Indiana, McCaskill, Missouri, Tester, Montana. Are you going to stick with the far left of your party like you pretty much always do? Are you going to vote as a bloc again? Or are you going to try and save your career and do what is only an election year conversion? Now, it's very important to remember, all of you, the 6 of you, are supposed to serve the people of your state, but it appears you all serve Chuck Schumer and company, and America's watching. And as I said earlier, Justice Kavanaugh is about to face the fight of his life. What he and his family will have to endure, it is sick, and by the way, in the end, Justice Kavanaugh is qualified. His experience impeccable. His judicial philosophy is sound. His intellect keen. And he should be quickly confirmed by the U.S. Senate. We're going to have more on this throughout the show, but now let's turn our attention to Europe. The president now has officially kicked off his visit ahead of a one-on-one meeting with Russian President Vladimir Putin and, of course, an all-important summit with NATO. This is where President Trump will negotiate with our allies that they pay their fair share for their national defense. We're not the world's piggy bank any longer. And sadly, Western Europe's love affair with the American presidency actually died because the appeaser-in-chief, Barack Obama, left office. Now, instead, President Trump is facing widespread protests across the continent. This is just one more reminder that many in Western Europe prefer weakness, not a strong America. For example, remember Obama's feckless apology tour that was revered by all the leaders in Europe? You may remember a lot of this.
America, like every other nation, has made mistakes and has its flaws. In America, there's a failure to appreciate Europe's leading role in the world. Instead of celebrating your dynamic union and seeking to partner with you to meet common challenges, there have been times where America has shown arrogance and been dismissive, even derisive.
Issues of women's equality are by no means simply an issue for Islam. In Turkey, Pakistan, Bangladesh, Indonesia, we've seen Muslim-majority countries elect a woman to lead. Meanwhile, the struggle for women's equality continues in many aspects of American life.
Now, the press, they picked up on Europe's love affair with Barack Obama, echoed his effusive praise. One headline read, quote, Obama wows Berlin and the crowd with historic speech. President Obama goes abroad and the world is happier for it. Obama connects with young Europeans. Now, compare that love fest to the treatment. Let's go back to Ronald Reagan, what he received. Like President Trump, Reagan led the world with American exceptionalism and the concept of peace through strength. And by the way, Europe was not loving Reagan during an early trip to Europe. Reagan was met by thousands of protesters. This happened all across the continent. In London, West Berlin, Reagan was even, quote, jeered during a speech at the European Parliament in France. And of course, Reagan's policies ultimately ushered in the end of the Cold War, brought down the Berlin Wall, pushed the Soviet Union out of many Eastern European countries. But if history tells us anything, Europe apparently doesn't learn. And here we are today with more animosity towards a sitting U.S. president because he projects America as a force for good and strength in the world. Now, the protests that we will see in Europe all week are exactly the same as Reagan faced. The parallels are uncanny. Now, this is the greatest tribute that America is now back and strong and actually leading on the world stage. The apology tour is over. Tomorrow, this show will be hitting the road. That's right, Hannity. We will be broadcasting live from Europe as we continue to monitor the president's important trip. And tomorrow night, we'll be there to cover it all for you. We hope you'll join us. Now, let's turn our attention to the deep state tonight. Disgraced former FBI lawyer Lisa Page, she has been subpoenaed to appear before a closed-door session in the House of Representatives tomorrow. And sources are telling Fox News tonight she does plan to comply with that subpoena, although I guess anything can happen. We'll keep you posted on everything we learn from that hearing. Also, this week, Page's one-time boyfriend, Trump-hating FBI agent at the center of it all, Peter Strzok, will testify in public this Thursday before the House Judiciary and Oversight Committees. This could be one of the most contentious hearings in years. We will be covering that. And according to a brand new report tonight from John Solomon, the FBI was reportedly in possession of, get this, 3 different versions of the now infamous dirty dossier that Clinton bought and paid for, phony debunked op research based on Russian lies put together by a foreign national. Now, we know this phony dossier was used as the basis for the initial investigation into the Trump-Russia collusion witch hunt, and it was the bulk of information to get a FISA warrant not once, but 4 times. Rod Rosenstein signed the last one. John Solomon will be here tonight with a report. Also, we're learning that the Lieutenant General Michael Flynn's sentencing hearing has now mysteriously been delayed again. What is another bizarre move by Robert Mueller's witch hunt. And meanwhile, Flynn is now pleading for his case to be wrapped up. And according to a report from our own Sarah Carter, Mueller's so-called pit bull, Andrew Weissman, may have actually leaked details surrounding Mueller's investigation to the Associated Press. That is a problem. You're not allowed to do that. And as we speak, Paul Manafort, not convicted of a thing, is sitting 23 hours a day in solitary confinement in a federal prison over a 2005 tax case. And breaking this week, we have more news from the House Intel Committee Chairman Devin Nunes, and he is now calling for a probe of 42 Obama-era officials to determine the role that they played in targeting the Trump campaign to influence our election. We'll have more on this in a moment. First, joining us now to reaction to all the breaking news, the author of the book, Why We Fight, Fox News national security strategist Dr. Sebastian Gorka, NRA TV contributor Dan Bongino. Let's go to the hysteria. The fact that we actually have the left, X, fill in the blank, we're going to use the same words no matter who Donald Trump picks, is pretty revealing, but it's also 101 of the Democratic Party. Smear, besmirch, slander, lie, racist, sexist, misogynist, homophobic, xenophobic, Islamophobic, dirty air, water, kill children, and grandma. It's all the same, Dr. Gorka. We never get any variation of that theme.
No, we don't. And the really incredible thing is that there isn't one indication amongst anybody on the left that they really understand that this is bad for them. But let them continue to do so. There's no realization that this does not play well outside the bubble. This is great in Hollywood. This is great in New York. This is great in, the DNC's cocktail parties in Georgetown. But it doesn't resonate with the American people. They have a narrative which is ideologically driven, and whatever the president does, they will attack him. And sooner or later, this will bear certain political consequences for them. My concern is that they're upping the ante on the things that are truly undemocratic. Yes, they'll smear us. They smear you, me, whoever they pick to be the next associate justice. But the issue is when it comes to harassment and the use of violence. There's no equivalent of Antifa on the right. Doesn't exist. Does not exist. There's no story of...
Yeah, I don't mean to interrupt.
There's no story. No, there's no story like James Hodgkinson at the baseball diamond just a few miles from where I'm sitting. You don't have Republicans go out with a hit list trying to kill Democrat congressmen. Guess which side that happens on? It happens on the left.
I don't see any ideas from the left for this election except we know what it is. Open borders, keep Obamacare. They want their crumbs back. They want to impeach Trump, and they don't want the president to get the Supreme Court nominee he wants. Dan, can you name a single thing that they are putting forward that helps the American people? Because I'm not hearing one single thing except oppose, oppose, oppose.
Yeah. No, and I'm glad you brought this up. You know, Sean, Trump is dunking on the left and the media on a daily basis now, and they've gone from derangement now to sheer panic. And here's why. It's because of what you just said, precisely because of it. The left doesn't have an agenda, Sean. There is absolutely no popular mandate for enormous government, high taxes, government-controlled health care, and complete government control of education. There is zero popular mandate for that. Why does this Supreme Court thing matter, and why have they now adjusted to their new outrage campaign? Because, Sean, they can't legislate. They have to legislate from the bench where they only have to convince one person. Who? A judge, because they can't convince the American people that this crap agenda they have is real. Remember, liberalism stinks for liberals, too. Don't forget that, Sean.
It's amazing because what they can't get done at the ballot box because the American people would never buy it, Dr. Gorka, and I think Dan Bongino's right, or what they could never get done legislatively without blowing up their careers, they try to use the courts for. A real judge respects that the legislative branch has their job, and their job is to take the exact text and the Constitution's exact text and see where the line is. It's not their job to legislate.
No, but Dan's point is incredibly important. And it's not just using activists in, the Ninth Circus Court or wherever. It is, that's their short circuit to get what they want. But it's also the intimidation, the harassment. I think, Pruitt's resignation is also a function of they don't have a mandate, they don't have an agenda. But that's why it's so important what Kavanaugh said last night. He only made two substantive statements. He talked about the women in his life, his inspiration, but he only said two things. Judges don't legislate, and a SCOTUS judge interprets the Constitution.
I'll give you the last word, Dan Bongino. It's very, very obvious how the left is now speaks with one voice. That's why those 6 senators, they have toed the line of Chuck Schumer, not their constituents.
Sean, they think like the Borg in Star Trek. They think with a hive mind. They're not independent entrepreneurs like conservatives. And that's why this attack strategy sometimes works for them. They think with a hive mind. They're not independent.
Really well said, both of you. All right, thank you both. We have a really busy night. We have Professor Alan Dershowitz. We have Joe DeGenova. And we have Newt Gingrich. All coming up straight ahead. All right, here with reaction to my opening monologue, former U.S. Attorney for the District of Columbia, our friend Joe DeGenova, who, by the way, has done legal work for me in the past. Not recently, thank God, because he's very expensive, because he's that good. I'm only kidding, Joe. And this brand new book, out by Professor Dershowitz, is absolutely amazing. You need to read it. It really is educational. It's called The Case Against Impeaching Donald Trump. Harvard Law School professor Alan Dershowitz. By the way, right after this show tonight, 10 Eastern, Professor Dershowitz will be hosting an online book signing. You can order that book, submit a suggestion right on my website, Hannity.com. It's on my website, Hannity.com. One of the things that is so sad is how polarized we are.
We can't talk to each other. We can't talk to each other.
When Martha's Vineyard.
Right. When I go to court and I argue against the prosecutor, Rudy Giuliani, he was the young prosecutor when I was a young defense attorney. We fought each other like tigers, and then we'd walk out, shake hands, and have a drink. You could talk to each other. I understood his position. He understood my position. He was doing his job. I was doing my job. It's gone. Look at the nomination last night. A blank slate. Whoever it is, we're going to oppose. Look, I would have nominated somebody else. My choice would have been Merrick Garland. I think the Republicans stole that nomination. But I'm going to have an open mind about Kavanaugh.
He's an intellectual.
Brilliant guy. Look, he went to Yale Law School, Not bad. I went to Yale Law School. We were both first in our class. Then he taught at Harvard. Hey, not bad.
I wasn't first in my class, Professor.
But he's a brilliant guy. And, when I can't tell you the content of my conversation with the president, but the president did ask me my advice, and one of the things the president emphasized was his academic background and the fact that he had such a strong academic background and that he was teaching at Harvard, at Yale, at Georgetown, all these places, and Notre Dame. And that means he has an open mind. Look, would I wish he had different views? I'm going to disagree with him.
He also changed his mind.
He did, and that's a great attribute, the ability to. He's going to serve on the court 30 years. None of us has any idea what the crucial issues will be 30 years from now.
You know who I've been friends with a long, long time, and we agree on foreign policy, on the Middle East, on Israel, is Joe Lieberman.
Yeah, me too.
And Joe Lieberman, when he ran as an independent, you know what he said? He said, just stop saying you like me, because it wasn't helping. Let me bring Joe DeGenova in. Joe, I know you're going to like this book. Seriously, it is rare.
I know
right
I will.
now,
I know
Professor
I will.
Dershowitz is under fire for standing up for principles he's always held.
Yes.
This is not a good time.
Well, the reason for that is very simple. You can't be honest anymore. You can't be intellectually honest. And the reason is, and I hate to say this, the leftists and the Democrats have established an idiocracy. And it's populated by fools, knaves, and intellectual pickpockets. Just all you have to do is listen to Senator Ben Cardin, who on Face the Nation the other day said that the nominee for the Supreme Court was coming from an extremist organization, the Federalist Society, members of which included John Roberts, Nino Scalia, Clarence Thomas, Sam Alito, and Neil Gorsuch. When a United States senator says something as stupid and as ignorant and as uninformed as that, that's why people are treating Alan Dershowitz the way they are at the Cape. It's an embarrassment. The intellectual dishonesty of these people is staggering. They're frightened of other ideas.
Let's talk about this book in the context of where we are with the Mueller investigation, because you have called this for what it is from the beginning. It's very dangerous when we criminalize political differences, which are your words, not mine.
Right. No, I agree. And I think Mueller is going to end up not having accomplished very much, because you cannot indict a sitting president. We know that Kavanaugh agrees with that as well. And you cannot impeach a president unless he's committed a crime. Collusion is not a crime. The president can't obstruct justice by simply exercising his authority under Article 2. So in the end, there's just going to be a report, some low-hanging fruit. Some people will be indicted. Their families will be ruined.
Paul Manafort for a 2005 tax case, 23 hours a day?
Situation, and he should not be in jail. He should be out.
Has he been convicted and I missed it?
No, and poor black people shouldn't be in jail if they can't afford bail. It's a systemic problem, and just because you stand up for Paul Manafort doesn't mean you can't also stand up for poor people.
I think one of the greatest moments of the Trump presidency is when he pardoned a woman who was a first-time offender. No, it was the right thing to do.
It was terrific. It was the right thing to do, and he did it because his gut told him there was an injustice.
And when she said, I will not let the American people down, I actually got goosebumps. It was touching. And she into the arms of her family. Let me go. It's interesting. I know fake news is what they are, Joe DeGenova, but they're trying to equate a 2009 writing, I believe it was Minnesota Law Review, if my mind is correct, by Judge Kavanaugh as it relates to going after a sitting president, to that's why Trump picked him. He did this before the Obama administration. Your reaction to that?
Well, look, all of this nitpicking about individual writings means absolutely nothing. It's any port in a storm. He is such a qualified candidate. He is so superb. This is what they've fallen to. It's not going to work. And I predict at least 3 Democrats are going to vote for him.
All right. Thank you, Joe DeGenova. This book right here, you can go to Hannity.com. In 23 minutes, Professor Dershowitz is going to sign copies. This book, if you care about justice and the president, what the witch hunt, you're going to want to read this book. It's important for anybody, any political persuasion. Congratulations. Good to see you, sir.
Appreciate it.
When we come back, Newt Gingrich. Oh, this just breaking, just in. Lisa Page, Fox News has learned she will not appear in front of lawmakers tomorrow. She will not comply with the subpoena. We'll give you those new developments straight ahead. All right, this now a Fox News alert breaking just moments ago. Our own Catherine Herridge reporting that the corrupt FBI lawyer, Lisa Page, now will in fact not comply with the subpoena and will not be testifying before a closed-door session of Congress tomorrow, which she said up until about an hour ago she would be attending. Here with reaction, author of the New York Times bestseller, Trump's America, The Truth About America's Great Comeback. And he is also the executive producer of The First American, which is now available on Amazon Prime Video. Former Speaker of the House, Fox News contributor Newt Gingrich is with us. She is now citing, if I may, Mr. Speaker, the idea that, in fact, congressional source said that they did expect her, but in fact she's claiming that she didn't get the materials from Congress that she thought she would have.
Well, I mean, who knows what the deal is here? Increasingly, these guys sound like the old mafia bosses who used to show up for the Kefauver hearings many, many years ago in the early days of television, and they would sit there and they would plead the fifth. And for the country at large, it was a huge spectacle, and it kind of gave you the signals who's guilty. You're discovering that at the very senior levels of the FBI, and I believe of the Justice Department under Obama, you had a level of corruption that makes it very dangerous for them to show up and to actually testify. And so I think their lawyers, legitimately under our system, are saying to them, to protect yourself, you cannot go under oath and start talking about this stuff, or you're going to either going to reveal information that will put you in jail, or you're going to end up committing perjury. And so I think you're seeing a real example. I mean, it sounds to me like if they didn't have a whole lot to hide, they wouldn't be hiding. And what we're seeing is people who I think have a lot to hide.
Well, listen, I would actually say, and I said this about the FBI Director James Comey, whoever allowed him to write that book, who was his attorney, and go on that book tour, I think did not serve him particularly well. And I reminded him at the time he had the right to remain silent. Lisa Page was the top attorney for Andrew McCabe, the deputy director of the FBI, and the boyfriend of Peter Strzok, who's at the heart of all of this. She's involved in the text messages. We will stop him, insurance policy, calling Trump every name in the book, etc. I honestly feel when you think of the ramifications and how profound it is that they wanted to literally alter a presidential election, in a way, I don't think I would allow her to testify.
Look, I think you're faced with what is increasingly obvious as a bureaucratic coup d'etat, where they literally were trying to prop up Secretary Clinton no matter how guilty she was, and they're trying to find some device to block Donald Trump no matter how innocent he was. And I think this is, I mean, if you want to see evidence that there is a deep state, all you have to do is follow this couple, all of their various tweets and text messages, text messages, and you begin to realize there's something profoundly wrong going on.
Yeah. Well, obviously there really is, because also Peter Strzok was the one writing the exoneration. He's the one that replaced gross negligence with extreme carelessness. He's the one that interviewed Michael Flynn. He didn't think Michael Flynn was lying. He interviewed Hillary Clinton. 3 days later, she was exonerated, but he had been building the exoneration case since May. This happened in July. On top of that, he was at the heart of the start of what is the phony Russia case. This guy was up to his eyeballs in every single solitary thing leading up to this election, with the desire to rush the Russia investigation so that they could get Trump. This is about impacting an election.
Look, I think for everyday common sense non-lawyers, and I'm not a lawyer, all you have to do is ask yourself the following picture. Paul Manafort, who has not been convicted yet of anything, is apparently spending 23 hours a day in solitary confinement. Meanwhile, every single person in the Clinton team, no matter what they've done, has basically been ignored, exonerated, allowed to go free. Now, I mean, if you want to see how sick the system is, look at the way they're treating Paul Manafort. And look at the way they treated Hillary's aides, including the guy who took a hammer to break up the smartphones and took bleach bit to destroy the memory of the computers. And say to yourself, how come all these people had nothing done to them, and without even being convicted, Paul Manafort is in solitary confinement for 23 hours a day? And it tells you we have a very sick system.
A 2005 tax case. And remember what the judge said, Judge Ellis III, that they're putting the screws to Manafort for the purpose that he will sing or compose, and that the idea is to use him to either prosecute or impeach Donald Trump. The judge said that in the case. Let me move on. You see the left's reaction. Fill in the blank. They had it all prepared against whoever the president chose. Your reaction to that, and of course the president's selection. This is one of the most important decisions any president will make.
Look, I'm going to go out on a limb tonight. I believe that Judge Kavanaugh was so impressive last night that his introduction by the president, his own speech, the very appearance of his two daughters and his wife and his mother and his father, I believe that this is such a remarkable and easily defendable person. I'm just going to go out tonight and say I believe at least 3 Democrats are going to ignore the suggestion of the Democratic whip Dick Durbin that they ought to commit suicide and vote no, and they're going to vote yes. And I think you're going to see a real split between the radical extremist wing of the Democratic Party and people who believe that the system really should work and that they really do want to find a way to work in the system.
The very reliable Chuck Schumer votes of Claire McCaskill and Nelson and Heitkamp and Tester and the rest of them, it's going to be interesting to watch the election year conversion, which isn't real. Mr. Speaker, great to see you. Congrats on the book. We appreciate you being with us.
Always good to be with you.
When we come back, breaking news. The Hill's John Solomon is here with his breaking news report on how the FBI could have now had multiple versions, believe it or not, of this bought and paid for Hillary dossier. And Greg Jarrett as we continue.
Her salon was booked for weeks.
Tonight, the Hill's John Solomon has a brand new report. Look at this title, this headline. Did FBI get bamboozled by multiple versions of Trump dossier? John Solomon in the report writes, quote, memos the FBI is turning over to Congress show the Bureau possessed at least 3 versions of the dossier, and it's mostly unverified allegations of collusion. Joining us now, he's also, by the way, the author of There's John Solomon of The Hill and the author of this book, by the way, 2 weeks away now, The Russia Hoax, the illicit scheme to clear Hillary Clinton, frame Donald Trump, Fox News legal analyst Greg Jarrett. Okay, so let me get this straight. As the Nunes memo pointed out, as the Grassley-Graham memo pointed out, the bulk of information for the FISA warrant was that phony Clinton bought and paid for dossier with Russian lies put together by a foreign national, multiple versions, none of them verified, but all used to presented to a court and spread by people like John Brennan?
Yeah, I think you have it right, Sean. What we know now is that the FBI, according to Pete Strzok's own emails to his own intelligence team, they got one version from the liberal journalist David Corn, a Trump antagonist, one from Senator McCain, which came from the Steele people, and one that came from Glenn Simpson, who testified he didn't give a version of the dossier to the FBI. So they have 3 different versions, and they're talking about it. And I was thinking about how to explain this, why this is important. It's, in the intelligence world, it's called circular reporting. It's a real problem. It corrupts the intelligence process. But if I went to Amazon and I bought your book a few days ago, and then 3 days later it comes, and then 3 days later after it comes again, and then maybe a week later it comes again, a 4th time it comes again, you're going to check your credit card, make sure you weren't being charged for it. You're going to call Amazon and say, why do you keep sending me this here? The FBI doesn't do that. In fact, it gets more and more excited about investigating Trump, even though they know it's the fruit of a single tree that comes from a political motive. Hillary Clinton trying to defeat Donald Trump. It's bad intelligence work. That's what everybody I've interviewed inside the intelligence community is telling me today.
Greg, in your book, I actually know the pages because I've been studying your book and tearing it up. I actually have one version I tear out the pages. But I think it's page 100, 103. because we talked about it.
Right.
You actually write about that. Was there another version with Harry Reid given to?
Oh yeah.
By John Brennan?
Yeah. Look, the dossier never gets old. I've read it 100 times. I never fail to break out in laughter. I mean, it's a work of pure fiction, a bad novelist who continues to rework his twaddle, so multiple versions of it. No wonder there were so many people involved in this, propagating this thing and contributing to it. You know, Clinton acolytes, Sidney Blumenthal, Corey Scherer. You got John Brennan, who pretends to be the CIA director, but he's Hillary Clinton lackey and sycophant. And you've got Glenn Simpson, who, this is going to end badly for him. I've read through his testimony twice now.
Why?
It is inconceivable, the statements he makes, that he claims he didn't give the dossier to people.
When do we ever get an arrest in all of this? When do we ever get...
I think Charles Grassley is on to Glenn Simpson.
What about Comey and McCabe? And look at the news about Lisa Page tonight. And Peter Strzok's supposed to testify publicly Thursday.
Oh, yeah. Well, you know, I sent you a note a few hours ago telling you Lisa Page is not going to testify. She received...
By the way, he did. And he said it yesterday, too, just in case...
She received a subpoena in personam. That means you appear in person. There are no conditions to it. You don't get to RSVP it. It's a lawful subpoena. Failure to act is a criminal act. But her lawyers know that the D.C. courts are filled with liberal judges. They don't have a backbone. They're not going to go after her for defying a lawful subpoena. So she's thumbing her nose at the rule of law. She would normally have to go show up, but she could plead the Fifth. She could plead the Fifth, seek immunity. I wouldn't advise her to open her mouth. She's left the FBI. There's nothing in it for her to open her mouth.
Let me go back to this article, John, because this is important. This gets to the heart of the second part, which is first they allowed Hillary, who broke laws, to get away with it, and the fix was it. Now we got the second part. They tried to frame Donald Trump, and big time, this dossier was a big part of it.
Yeah, you know, when you think about it, instead of having sources in Moscow telling them that they were colluding with Russia, all they have are Hillary Clinton and journalists that they're kind of combing over to put together this very thin case, and then they're in this enormous hurry. They're trying to do it before the election, and that's what is most scary about this, the electoral pressure they used.
It's about impacting an election, which I was discussing with you. By the way, on Twitter, you can get John's column at Sean Hannity.